Majora's Mask is a culturally sophisticated game. It respectfully pulls from a number of real-world cultures and mythologies for its ideas and themes, and weaves them together into a setting that still feels entirely unique. In the future, we'll talk about topics like the game's heavy Mayan influence in both themes and philosophy, but today I want to talk about something a bit more narrow. Majora's Mask is home to a lot of enigmatic and mysterious figures, the kind of characters whose very existence spawns new theories and ideas even now, 22 years later. Characters like the Happy Mask Salesman weave a deep tapestry of myth and legend, but I don't think there's a single character in the entire game, or dare I say even the series, that is as mysterious and interesting as the titular Majora. Majora's impact on the Zelda fandom is, I think, without equal. I'd feel comfortable declaring Majora to be the most theorized on Zelda character, and they seem to be the most beloved too. If you Google Zelda tattoos, you'll see that a tattoo of Majora is probably the most common next to the Triforce itself and maybe the Master Sword. Majora dominates fan art, profile pictures. There's no doubt that Majora is a pinnacle of the fandom. However, Majora is a bit of a veiled figure, one we really don't know much about considering their single game appearance. Even in Majora's Mask, Majora doesn't take up any real spotlight until the very end, acting through Skull Kid until he no longer serves use to Majora. And I honestly think that it's this lack of information that fuels so much theorizing. But a lack of information only leads to Zelda theorists trying to fill in those gaps. And theories about Majora cover ground that ranges from examining Majora's real-world cultural inspiration to tying Majora in with Twilight Princess's interloper tribe. And a big focus of this theorization is Majora's name, which is what we'll be talking about today. What does the name Majora mean? Where does it come from? We're going to look at a couple theories, and then at the end of the video, I'm actually pleased to say that I'll give you a definitive answer, though it may not be what you expect. First though, why are people so certain that the name Majora means something? I mean, lots of fantasy names are just made up, right? And absolutely that is true, even in Zelda. But the creators of Legend of Zelda also love a name loaded with meaning, and you can find them all through the series. Even Link, the main character, is named that because he's meant to form a link between you and the game world. Majora's Mask in particular is heavy on symbolic naming, such as the case of Termina, meaning terminal as in dead, or as a terminal between the worlds, or fierce deity drawing reference to Buddhist protector spirits. So there's a lot of surrounding evidence for the idea that a name as unusual as Majora might have some deep influence. But what does Majora mean? Well, there's a couple different theories. Like we mentioned earlier, Majora's Mask has a lot of cultural heritage, pulling from Mesoamerican cultures for a lot of inspiration. And many people have theorized that not just the name of Majora, but a lot of the themes of the game may have come from a South American indigenous group. In Brazil, at the mouth of the Amazon River, right before it dumps into the Atlantic Ocean, Marajoara Island can be found. Marajoara Island is a largely inhospitable land which spends much of the year totally flooded, and the archaeological remnants of many short-lived cultures can be found, leading anthropologists to believe the island was unsuitable to long-term habitation. However, work in the 1900s uncovered remains of what seemed to be a large populace that not only survived on Marajoara Island, but thrived from about 800 to 1600 AD. These people showed sophisticated systems of agriculture, ran thorough trade systems, and had the time to develop some of the most impressive and complex artistic styles of the South American indigenous peoples. And it's in this art, which is the bulk of what informs us about the Marajoara people, which is of interest to us. Most of the Marajoara art we have is in the form of ceramics, particularly bowls and vases. The art features very distinctive styling, and it particularly utilizes a very unique style of line art. I'm honestly pretty bad at describing art, and I don't have the vocabulary to describe what I would like to, but I think even just looking at these pictures, you can probably understand what I'm getting at. The art style found on artifacts left behind by the Marajoara have a striking similarity to the art in Majora's Mask, particularly the style of the line art. Look at this vase that has a face on it and the ways the lines wrap around it. They match very closely to the lines around Majora's eyes. Even the spacing between the two sets of lines are similar. There's a couple misconceptions relating to this comparison that I'd like to shed light on though. When seeing discussion around the Marajoara, you'll often see this quite striking petroglyph on a rock that looks shockingly similar to Majora. While the picture is very cool, it was definitely not Marajoaran. In fact, the petroglyph can be found as part of the Tamani Peshwa Petroglyph Trail in the Columbia Hills State Park in the state of Washington within the good old US of A. The collection is part of the She Who Watches hike, named after the most famous petroglyph, and the petroglyphs were created by indigenous tribes of the Columbia River. As I'm sure I don't need to tell you, Washington and the Amazon are very far away. The other thing to watch out for is attempts to further tie the Marajoara to Majora's Mask by claiming things about their religious beliefs and customs, like that they were an apocalyptic people who worshipped the moon, or that they had an obsession with masks, which are both claims I've seen in my research and are both completely unprovable. The truth is that we know very little about the beliefs of the Marajoara. We know a good deal about their burial customs, since that's most of what we've found, but not much about their actual religion is known, outside of guesswork based on their objects of worship, and guesses based on common practice by contemporary Amazonian cultures. We are aware of the depiction of a fish-like water goddess, but as of yet, we've not discovered any fears of a wrathful moon god bent on ending the world. Many contemporary Amazonian cultures worshipped the moon as a positive force, and this very well may have been the case for the Marajoara as well. But either way, the sources are way too scant for people to make such definitive claims. Overall though, the connection to the Marajoara people is an interesting one, and there are definitely some parallels. It isn't the only idea on the table though. The other most popular theory on the origin of Majora's name comes from the Japanese meaning of the name itself, Majora. In Japanese, the word Majo means witch or sorcerer. I'm not an expert in Japanese by any means, this is just the result of my research, but it seems as though witch isn't a perfect translation and Majo instead refers to a female magic user more generally. In this case, the Majo in Majora would refer to their magical powers, which makes sense considering Majora's origin as a power brought about by evil hexing rituals. There's also another Japanese lens which people often look at the name through, that being Majin, which often refers to a demon. So the idea is that Majora essentially refers to both the mask's place as a feminine magic user and a demon. However, this theory does lose a bit of steam when you realize the Japanese name for Majora is Mujura, which came before the English name. So both of these theories have some pretty interesting evidence, but both theories also have their weaknesses as well. It's pretty tough to determine which one's more likely to be the correct theory, isn't it? Ah, drats. If only we could just ask Aonuma directly where the name comes from. That would solve everything. And now's the part where I tell you that somebody did exactly that. We know exactly what the name Majora means because Aonuma straight up told us. Aonuma did an interview with Nintendo Dream, a Japanese magazine that focuses on Nintendo games, in 2015. We have a translation thanks to the wonderful people at Nintendo Everything. In the interview, which focuses on Majora's Mask, the interviewer asks Aonuma about the origin of the name Majora. Here, I'll read out the relevant passage in full.
What is the origin of the name Majora?
Imamura, who made the design for Majora's Mask, invented the word by combining characters from the movie title Jumanji and from his name, Imamura.
And what did you think when Mr. Imamura told you the name for the first time?
I thought Majora might be good from the beginning. However, it was another discussion whether or not to attach the subtitle Majora's Mask.
For reference, Mr. Imamura refers to Takaya Imamura, who was the art director for Majora's Mask. And there you have it. The meaning of Majora's name is totally arbitrary. It doesn't have a deeper meaning related to ancient Brazilian tribes or to interesting Japanese translations. It's the result of Imamura being on a Robin Williams kick. Maybe in another universe, Majora is named Doubtfire. I know this is seemingly pretty disappointing. It does always suck to find out that you put considerably more thought into the meaning of something than the developers or the writers did, but considering the Zelda timeline, that should be something that we're pretty accustomed to. And Majora's Mask is still such a context and lore-rich game that's still so rife for analysis even 22 years later, that I think one aspect of the game having a mundane and boring origin isn't any sort of damnation. Plus, I think it's pretty funny. I also think that even though the name Majora isn't specifically related to the Marajoara people, there is absolutely no doubt that Mesoamerican and Amazonian art and culture had a big impact on Majora's Mask. You can see it in quite a few different aspects of the game. So how do you feel about this? Is it a big disappointment to you that such a cool villain name has such a silly origin? Or like me, are you able to see the humor in it? This isn't common knowledge, but it also isn't exactly hidden, so maybe you already knew? And which theory do you like better if one of them was to be true? Thanks for watching at any rate. If you'd like to talk to me about this, you can do so over on my Discord or on my Twitter. And if you'd like to support me, a like, sub, or share is a great way to do that. I also have a Patreon where you can join the Subrosian parade you saw march across the screen earlier. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe out there. It's dangerous to go alone.